All right, let me bring back in my guests. Criminal defense attorneys David Bruno and Marie Pereira are with me. Marie, I got to start with you because this is another case involving domestic violence. And I thought that his testimony on the stand today was the perfect example of a domestic abuser. We know he was one. He was convicted of those crimes, wasn't allowed in on the trial. But I found him to be manipulative. I thought he'd think he'd put one over on everybody. He tried to be a little charming, told a story that no one could possibly believe, and then made himself the victim and even tried to paint himself as somebody who was having an affair with the sister. All of it just checked all the boxes for me. How about you?
Most of domestic violence aggressors are narcissists, and their antisocial behavior is showing. His antisocial behavior is showing up on the stand. He really thinks that he can come up there and concoct that story, like David said, and the jurors were going to buy it. At the end of the day, you know what? He's nodding when they're reading off the guilty verdicts. He's acting like he doesn't care, and he's just an antisocial person. And he really thought his lies were going to be believed. Obviously, the jurors saw right through it.
Yeah, no question about it. David Bruno, you touched on this earlier, so the preposterous story that he told the jury. I think it was so preposterous, it might have even angered jurors. And I think that may have played a role in the only hour and 20 minutes. If I was talking about a surprise, that would be the only surprise here, was that it was an hour and 20 minutes. And I'm not even sure if you might think that surprise.
No, I'll tell you what. When this thing, when a defendant takes the stand, it takes away the arguments that defense counsel has about the proof beyond a reasonable doubt and the presumption of innocence and the right to cross-examine and everything. And all eyes are on the defendant. And this is what happened right here. This is why you got that quick verdict, is because he put his credibility at issue. And when he opened his mouth and he gave his version of events, it just did not match the evidence. They have trajectories and ballistics, and they used experts and medical examiners on wounds and blood spatter and all kinds of different things that just make it absolutely impossible as to what he brought up in his testimony. And the prosecutors did an excellent job. In the cross-examination first, it started out with cross-examination, and then the closing arguments were emotional and very point-driven and basically common sense. The common sense of the defendant's testimony just didn't make sense, and it didn't match up with the evidence, and that's why that verdict came back so quickly.
Yeah, no question about it. David, you could not, if you wanted to concoct a story that flew in the face of the evidence in this case, you could not have made up a better story than he came up with, the one he was trying to sell this jury. Marie, I thought there was maybe, and again, maybe, before I heard him talk, there might have been a sense that maybe this was a second-degree case as opposed to a first-degree case. Again, first degree requires premeditation. This was, according to the prosecutors, as a result of some kind of argument they had. There was a lot going on there. There was an attack on him. He perhaps was attacking the victim as well. Any thoughts on that?
I think if there was a chance, the fact that he took the stand and denied that anything happened and tried to blame somebody else and tried to stain another person's name to decrease his motivation for doing what he did, killed it. If they thought that it might have been like an act of passion or something that was done in haste during a commotion, without thought and without intentionality, the fact that he took the stand and tried to lie it up like that made him look like a manipulator, and it killed any chance of them having any sort of empathy for him.
Yeah, no question about it. And you know, I commend the victim in this case, Lisa Rucker, the surviving victim, taking the stand, speaking directly, doing what she needed to do, persevering for 5 years. Our Chanley Painter actually had a chance to speak with her after the verdict. And here she's talking about, and this was heartbreaking, she hadn't seen before photos of the damage done to her sister who was killed in this event. And here was her reaction to that. Let's take a listen.
The night of, she was about 6 feet away from me, and she was facing the wall, so I couldn't see the side of her face where the bullet had went through. So I just assumed she was in and out of consciousness like me. I didn't know that it had basically went through her brain and exited her orbital socket. What I was told is she basically died on impact. I didn't know that, so it was really hard to see those photos.
David Bruno, you know, we heard one of the press conference, the speakers was one of the prosecutors talking about why they didn't seek the death penalty. They went through the aggravators and mitigators and determined this wasn't a death penalty case. Did that surprise you? This seemed like a case that maybe warranted that.
Oh, wow. I mean, the prosecutors know much more about the case than I to make a death penalty decision. But, I mean, look, you have a surviving victim. Don't forget, this is a homicide case, a murder case, a premeditated allegation with a surviving victim that comes in front of the jury disfigured in the head. And also, the child was present at the time. I mean, this was not a sympathetic case for the defendant at all, especially in light of the surviving victim. And then try to point the finger at a victim here. And again, just highlighting the inconsistencies with the testimony and the evidence. It was not going to work. And one last point. I mean, how about the defendant winking and blowing a kiss to the prosecutor after hearing the verdict? This man should be where he's going, and that's to prison for the rest of his life.
Yeah, sentencing November 28th, facing life in prison without the possibility of parole. Guys, stand by. Let me bring in CourtTV.